Let's get to those games in the NFL last night. Good news for the Ravens. Bad news for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tale of two teams, without a doubt. Ravens are playing fantastic football right now. Lamar Jackson was incredible last night for the Ravens. He ends up throwing 5 touchdown passes, 41-31 the final score. Derrick Henry also with a big game there. Baker Mayfield threw for 3 touchdowns in defeat. Tampa Bay actually had a 10-0 lead in this game, but the issue for the Buccaneers coming out of this game is pretty serious. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's hear from Lamar Jackson on another MVP-like performance, going on the road to Tampa Bay and coming back to win.
Let's go. We got to score points. To us, we see a team just moving the ball and putting points on the board without us scoring. We didn't really do anything. Our drive, the first drive, it's like, man, we got to have some urgency with ourselves, and that's what it was. And I believe that's what we did. The next couple drives, we started putting points on the board. Those guys were still getting after us a little bit, but, we came out on top. Our mind is just focus on the drive, focus on the play, and just go from there. Try to put points on the board, but we don't really look at it like we're clicking and we got them. It's like we got to score each and every time we out there. Nah, I'm chasing something right now, so each and every game is going to be the same thing for me. I'm going to be the same person. Every game I'm trying to win. I don't even worry about the old year, years prior. I'm focused on right now, and us just being 5-2 don't really matter. We just trying to be 1-0 each and every week we out there on that field.
Ravens playing great football at the moment. Buccaneers have been playing really good offensive football for the entire season. Maybe that will change now. A couple of key injuries coming out of last night's game with Tampa Bay. It's being reported this morning that Chris Godwin, their great slot wide receiver, is going to miss the remainder of the season with a dislocated ankle. He's going to have surgery and will return for the 2025 NFL season, although he is a free agent. Also, Mike Evans, the future Hall of Fame wide receiver who caught his 100th touchdown yesterday, also left the game and is undergoing an MRI. There's a chance the Bucs will not have either of those 2 wide receivers, at least for the near future. We will see. All right, Chargers took on the Cardinals last night. In case you missed this game, it was on ESPN+. Not sure how that worked out, but either way, kind of a dull one, but the Cardinals end up winning. Final 17-15. Kyler Murray with a couple of touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 passing, and it wasn't for a lack of moving the ball on the Chargers side. In fact, if you look statistically at the Chargers, looked like they had a pretty decent game. They just fumbled near the goal line and also were just kicking a bunch of field goals. And Jim Harbaugh, after the game, head coach of the Chargers, essentially said the reason why they didn't win was executing in the red zone.
8 drives, 6 of them were, 5 were scoring drives and 1 should have been. We fumbled at inside the 5-yard line there, but thought we moved the ball very effectively through the air. Kept waiting for the running game to pop, but we weren't able to. There's the details, of locking it up, whether you're an offensive player or a defensive player, and just got to continue to emphasize it. And the fumble near the goal line, ball needs to be in the other arm, and can't lighten up. So that's what we're going to do. Just not lighten up, tighten up, and experience of these kind of games. Put the steel in the spine. That's what we need to do.
Chargers didn't score in the red zone. That led to the Cardinals' win. Meanwhile, the Arizona Cardinals will be on the road this week taking on the Miami Dolphins. Their defense, it looks like, will face off with quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins yesterday said that he is indeed practicing and has full plans to play this week if he is cleared from concussion protocol. Some of the surrounding discussion was whether or not Tua should come back. Will he come back? Will he wear a Guardian cap, which is supposedly more protective on concussions? Tua pretty defiant yesterday in the media, saying that he's ready to come back and just has to be a little more careful.
It's got to be smart. That's it. It's got to be smart. My entire time playing football, I've been a competitor, and that, is or was sort of my edge. When I would run from high school, even in college, I would do the same thing. But it's a professional, setting. This is the professional level, the best of the best. you just can't be doing that. So definitely gotta stay more available for the team, for the organization, for our guys. Hey, I'm frustrated, but this is what it is. Do I want to be known for this? No, I don't. But that's the cards I've been dealt with, given the history of it. So it is what it is.
What have you learned throughout this process? Excuse me.
That it's not good to get concussions.
Fair enough from Tua. He'll play this week, it looks like, against the Cardinals. Meanwhile, let's get to some sports betting news before we get to Matthew Waters. There's a lawsuit that's been filed last week against Underdog Fantasy, Prize Picks, and Yahoo Fantasy Sports, alleging that the companies are operating not only as daily fantasy sports platforms, but also offering and accepting illegal sports bets. It's a little complicated because they're claiming that there's more than $10 million per month from prop and pick'em bets, were essentially what FanDuel and DraftKings are offering as well. Underdog Fantasy has dismissed the claim, saying it's a completely transparent phishing attempt by a plaintiff that will get dismissed sooner than later. That's what they told Front Office Sports. We will see how this is handled in the state of Massachusetts. All right, back to the National Football League. It appears Jaden Daniels could potentially miss the showdown with Caleb Williams this week. Washington takes on Chicago. He's suffering with a rib injury, and they're saying that it's currently week to week. Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver on the San Francisco 49ers, has a torn ACL and MCL and is going to miss the remainder of the season. The 49ers are already playing without Christian McCaffrey and already playing without Deebo Samuel, who has pneumonia, could miss time too. 49ers need some pass catchers going into their games the next couple of weeks. Jamison Williams, who was suspended for sports wagering a year ago, has now looks like he's facing a potential 2-game suspension for violating the PED policy in the National Football League, although nothing official has been said just yet. And also DK Metcalf, great wide receiver on the Seattle Seahawks, week to week with an MCL sprain. There's a possibility he could play this week. The Kansas City Chiefs have lost another player to injury. Wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster, also cornerback Jalen Watson, are both going to be out this week. Although the New Orleans Saints were playing without all their wide receivers, Raheem Shaheed, Chris Olave, they have signed former Chief Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They're also playing without their starting quarterback. And also Desmond Ridder has been signed by the Raiders off the Cardinals practice squad. Ridder could play this week. Gardner Minshew is the starter. Aiden O'Connell is going to miss some time. Oklahoma Sooners have had a tough year, offensively especially, and so they're turning back to another quarterback. This time it is Jackson Arnold. He will start this week against number 18 Ole Miss. It has been a roller coaster of quarterbacks for Oklahoma this season, some winning and some losing, and they're ready to make a change. Also, Michigan is not named their starting quarterback. Jack Tuttle replaced Alex Orji early October, still trying to decide what they're going to do. They basically are having a hard time scoring. Tonight in college football, Sam Houston State is 5.5-point favorites on the road against FIU. Louisiana Tech home favorites of 6.5 against UTEP. And also news yesterday from the WNBA, as the players have opted out of their current collective bargaining agreement, and they could even face a work stoppage if they don't get a new deal by the 2025 season. Welcome back to the Newswire here on SportsGrid, as we have Matthew Waters with us from Legal Sports Report. And, certainly there's a very big change that's already occurred for those of you who still view cable and have these regional sports networks. If those of you are not familiar and you haven't tuned into, Bally Sports, it's no longer that. It's now called FanDuel Sports Network. So let's bring in Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report. And, Matt, a lot of this is, the Diamond bankruptcy case that they're trying to pull themselves out of. It seems like they've gotten at least a Band-Aid now or some duct tape. I don't know what you would call it. To hang on here. But the great news is that FanDuel has stepped up and has decided to basically keep the ball rolling, so to speak. In fact, anywhere you tune into any of your regional sports networks that were named Bally are now FanDuel. So I was wondering what you thought of this new agreement.
Craig, what I think of the agreement is I think FanDuel is going to do what Bally's always hoped they could do with these regional sports networks, and is just grow their brand even more. Look, when I saw this deal change and I was on social media, people didn't realize that Bally's was even still a sports betting brand, Craig. they said, oh yeah, I know there's a Bally's casino or there's this and that. But a lot of people didn't even know that Bally Bet was a sports book that you could choose to bet with. And that just shows you, what Bally's did with their interactive plan there. They've made so many changes. But now you have FanDuel coming in, and FanDuel is already a household name, right? So this really is just an extra boost for them. They already have such a wide appeal across the U.S. that, it's hard to think of making DraftKings and FanDuel even more of a household name than it already is. But certainly that's what this accomplishes for FanDuel. I was interested to see that shareholders the stock didn't pop more on this news, Craig. And I was surprised by that because, FanDuel and Flutter, their parent company right now, they have said that they will continue to acquire customers as long as it makes sense for them financially. And just about every operator with their second quarter earnings calls over the summer, they said that, yes, it is getting cheaper to acquire customers. So now FanDuel adds in this other funnel that wasn't even there before. Now it's not getting cheaper because they're being more efficient with their national marketing or they're more efficient with their promos or whatever it may be. Now it's cheaper just because it's a logo on the bottom of a screen somewhere that somebody's watching. And then they think, oh, let me fire up FanDuel. Let me see what's going on there. So I think it's a great move for FanDuel. Especially when you think about how do FanDuel and DraftKings, how do they edge out each other? If you're not a fan of either one right now, what is really the difference between the two? And I think this shows that FanDuel is just a bigger company in general, the Flutter company with the FanDuel brand. It's just a bigger, more diverse company than DraftKings. I think that's what you see with a deal like this. So it's a shame for Bally's. It's a shame it never worked out because on paper, it sounds like a great idea. Yeah. Have your brand on this, have people get more familiar with it. You don't really have to do a whole lot of marketing at that point. In effect, you think it should kind of work on its own and didn't for Bally's, but we'll see how much it moves the needle for FanDuel.
Yeah, and definitely a ton more credibility now, I think, for these regional sports networks, too. Having FanDuel, it's, the premier sports betting company along with DraftKings in the country. So I think good job by both parties here getting that done. Okay, so, ESPN Bet, certainly they're hoping that their brand, just lands people into their sports betting operator. We've, talked about this a ton of time. They're having so many now primetime games on college football and Monday Night Football as well. Do you think there's any correlation here potentially to making this work?
Craig, I don't know. I've been bringing these monthly numbers to you for a while now, talking about how well ESPN is doing on the digital side of things and on social and even on linear media. They broke all kinds of records. This is a press release, talking about their fiscal year. And listen to some of this. Their social media reach, 8.5 billion social engagements, which was 50% more than its next closest competitor. Its digital and social reach, they call it massive. Between ESPN Digital and ESPN Social, they combined to reach 66% of the United States adult population and 82% of adults in the key 18 to 49 demographic. That's key for sports television, and that's a key demo for sports betting as well. Craig, these numbers are so incredible that you sit there wondering how ESPN Bet can debut in New York with less than a 2% handle share. It just simply doesn't make sense to me when I see just how well ESPN is doing on the media side of things and how that gap just does not seem to be getting any closer to closed when you move over to sports betting. I'm not sure what else it will take at this point, Craig, if I'm being totally honest with you. And if you remember, we talked about the investor meeting that they had in Las Vegas, and it seemed like they were moving the goalpost a little bit. They had talked about, one of their presentations had talked about market share up to 20% for sports betting. And then we saw in this most recent presentation, the bull case was actually 10%. So you have to wonder what's going on at ESPN. They've had layoffs at ESPN Bet in the interactive division. Certainly that is not great to see when the product itself isn't delivering. So There are a lot of unanswered questions for ESPN Bet right now. Good news is, Craig, is that we get some of them answered on November 7th. That's the third quarter earnings call date for Penn. And look, Penn management is going to have to come in and kind of explain what's going on here if they don't have some good results to show. You know, they were able to curb their losses a little bit. They had some huge losses to start the year in Interactive. Seems like they figured that out. And they are improving with the product a little bit, and they're getting good playthrough. But it still just does not seem to reflect the amount of share they should get organically just from being ESPN Bet. So I'm really looking forward to that call in a couple weeks to see what they have to say.
All right. Well, finally, Caesar Sportsbook, again, as soon as betting was legalized, they jumped in right away. I see they have this new online game, Caesar's Empire. Tell us more about this new game that people can play.
You know what, Craig, what the game does isn't even really that important for our purposes when we talk about the fact that Caesars is leaning heavily so much into iGaming. And that's one of the things that's making it cheaper to get these sports betting customers too. They start off at casino, you throw them a bonus bet or two over on the sportsbook, and then they're in your sportsbook database at that point. The fact that they partnered with IGT to create a branded game with a lot of features that are popular, Craig. It has the popular lock it feature when it's on a jackpot. So if you're in the bonus game mode, you know, it'll lock certain features and payouts and bonuses. That's something that a lot of people like. That's going to drive traffic, honestly. And remember, we had this conversation over the summer where when BetMGM and Caesars get their product to a point where it's almost comparable with FanDuel and DraftKings, we might have a tussle for who is going to be at the top, because BetMGM and BetMGM and Caesars, they have such strong rewards programs and loyalty programs built through their casinos. So this is a great move for Caesars to be taking iGaming as seriously as it is, and I think it only brings in more customers for them.
Yeah, it does. All right, Matt, by the way, your Sixers just announced that Joel Embiid and Paul George out tomorrow night for opening night for the Sixers. So, you know, there's other things on TV, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah. Long
you
season,
and Joe Mazzulla really ruined my day, man.
Joe Mazzulla. Weird guy. All right, Matt. Thanks again.